Hello, welcome once again to Lehto's Law. I'm Steve Lehto. I mentioned a couple days ago in passing I had a tree story to tell you. I said, please remind me, and a couple people did. And so here's the story. This popped into my head the other day. I'd forgotten about it for years. But when I came back from law school, back to Michigan, became a lawyer, one of my oldest, dearest friends, a guy I've known for decades, called me and said, Steve, I got a little bit of a problem. Hoping you can help me with that. I go, sure, what is it? And he goes, I've got a cabin up north. Now, Michigan is a state comprised of two peninsulas. There is the lower peninsula and the upper peninsula. And people often talk about going up north. And up north can be upper, lower peninsula, or the entire upper peninsula. But he's got a cabin up north. And he goes, yeah, I've had the cabin for a while. And he goes, there's an interesting situation with the way the land is. He goes, at one point in time, there's one guy who owned a whole bunch of land here. And he sold the various parcels off. And he approached me recently and said, do you want to buy the parcel behind your cabin? And he goes, it's just a weird piece of property and it wouldn't really benefit me any. So I just said, nah, that's okay. I don't want it. So he goes, apparently he sold it to somebody else. And I said, okay. And he goes, so I go up to my cabin this past weekend. And as I pull up, near my cabin, I see a guy on my property with a chainsaw just chopping down trees. I go, wait. He's on your property? Yes. Chopping down your trees? Yes. What's the story? He said, well, I got out of my car, walked over and said, excuse me, sir, what's the story? And he goes, well, I just bought the piece of property back there, and I'm making a driveway to get to my property. My friend said, you bought that property back there? And he goes, yeah. And you understand this property up here is owned by me. I own this property. And the guy goes, oh, okay, cool, nice to meet you. My friend goes, but the trees you're chopping down are on my property. They're my trees. And the guy goes, yeah, but I'm making a driveway. My friend goes, you can't make a driveway across my property without my permission. And the guy goes, well, how am I supposed to get back to my property? My friend said, I think that's a personal problem, but I guess you should have thought of that before you bought a piece of property behind mine that's got no easements to it. And the guy goes, well, I think I'm allowed to do this. My friend goes, I think you're not. And the guy goes, well, I'm going to go talk to my lawyer. And he grabs his chainsaw, jumps in the car, and drives off. And I said, did you ever see the guy again? He goes, no. Did you ever hear from his lawyer? He goes, no. I go, do you know who he is? He goes, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. He goes, I asked around. I got his name. I found out the name and address of this guy. And I can give you the information right now if you want it. And I said, okay. And he goes, because when he told me he was going to talk to his lawyer, he goes, I told him I was going to talk to my lawyer. And he goes, congratulations, you're my lawyer. I said, okay. He goes, what should we do? I said, well, here's the thing. As with any legal situation, there's all kinds of things we can do. A veritable cornucopia of possibilities. What is your goal? I mean, do you really want to sue the guy and get compensation for the trees? Do you simply want him to go away? What do you want to happen? And he goes, well, to be honest, he goes, I don't want the guy driving across my property. So I don't want him chopping down trees. So I don't want to give him an easement or sell him an easement for that matter. I simply want him to go away. He goes, I'm a little annoyed that he chopped down a bunch of my trees. He goes, but I'd be happy if he simply went away. I just don't ever want to deal with him again. If he can figure out some other way to get to his property without crossing mine, he can obviously do that. He goes, but my number one goal is I simply want him to go away. I said, well, here's the good news. I generally don't write letters to people to threaten them with legal action. If I think someone's got a good case, 99 times out of 100, you're better off just filing the lawsuit. Got a good case? See you in court. But there are some occasions where you can write a letter that actually makes sense. And this is one of them. Because my friend said, he goes, I don't necessarily want to sue the guy. I just want him to go away. So I go, here's the interesting thing. There's a really cool law in Michigan. And I've mentioned a law related to it before. In the Michigan compiled laws, the blue books behind me, which are the law of Michigan, there's a law on conversion of property where you steal or convert the property of somebody else to your own benefit, which is MCL 600.2919A. But 629.19 no A is actually talking about stealing or destroying or damaging other people's timber. I kid you not. This is the kind of law, it's like, whoa. Someone passed a very specific law back in 1961, and it's damage or waste to land, damages, injunction, and contempt. Section 2919(1) Any person who cuts down or carries off any wood, underwood, trees, or timber, or despoils or injures any trees on another's land is liable to the owner of the land for 3 times the amount of actual damages. Okay? Now, there's a section here that talks about whether it was an accidental cutting of trees versus a voluntary or intentional cutting of trees. And so if you were to accidentally, like I honestly thought my property line went to here and I chopped a tree down, and you said, hey, that was on my property, and it turns out if a jury or a judge was going to believe that I actually made a good faith mistake, I'm liable for the value of that tree, okay? But someone who's cutting down trees they know belong to somebody else is liable for 3 times the amount of actual damages. And the amount of actual damages for those trees that you cut down of mine that I was so emotionally attached to and that I liked because they left my property feeling wooded, arguably we could say it's the cost of not the value of firewood, but it's the cost of replacing them. Let's go find an arborist. First time in my life I've ever said that word on a video. Let's go find an arborist and go, what's it going to cost to put some trees back identical to the ones that got chopped down? And then 3 times that. So I wrote a letter, and I my friend said I've got that guy's name and address. I wrote the guy a letter, and I said basically, hey, look, letterhead above, I'm an attorney. I represent the man whose property you were on this past Saturday. And from what I understand, you were chopping down trees with the intent of creating some sort of easement or driveway across my client's property. And as you know, you've got no legal right to do that. My client controls that property. And he's instructed me to inform you that, number 1, you are forbidden from setting foot on his property ever again. Number 2, the cutting you did of his timber this past Saturday, whatever day of the week it was unlawful and violates MCL 600-2919, which you may want to talk to your attorney about, because your attorney will explain to you that you're now liable for 3 times the value of those trees that you destroyed without permission. Now, my client has instructed me to take all necessary legal actions to keep you from doing this ever again in the future and to keep you off of his property. But because we're such nice people, and a word to the wise can be sufficient, we are just going to trust that we'll never see you again on that property. And if that's how it goes, that's how it goes. But just letting you know, and I phrased it a little more artfully than this. I will occasionally take some time to craft a letter. Words to the effect of, hey, if it happens again, I'm going to call fire down from the sky on you. And you're going to wish you'd never bought that property. You're going to wish you never even lived in that county. But the good news is, mailed the letter, certified return receipt requested. He signed for it. Never heard from him again. Ever. Gone. Now, my client had a couple trees get chopped down. We could have sued the guy over that, but my client said, look, it's a cabin up north. I want to go there and enjoy it. A little weirdness there, but the point is the guy never did come back. One of the reasons I said I didn't tell the story in my last video is I actually wanted to call my friend up and say, by the way, we haven't talked in a while about that incident. Did anything further ever happen? And he said, no, never heard from the guy again, never saw the guy again. As far as I know, the guy never even went back to the property. Don't even know who owns the property. Now, I've had people say, Steve, can you actually buy a piece of property that's landlocked like that and have no way to get to it? And yes, which is why you shouldn't buy a piece of property like that. And then you say, well, wait, that seems so weird and unfair. The way it happened, I think, and this has been a little while since we talked about this with my friend, but what had happened was there was a guy who owned almost all that property at one point in time. And as he sold off pieces of property, he would say, oh, by the way, I'm selling some of this piece of property, and I'm going to sell some of this piece of property, and the only way to get to here is to drive across this one. So when I sell this one, I'm going to tell them, by the way, you're doing that with an easement to this piece of property for these people. You understand that, okay? And for some weird reason, the guy sold off all these properties and apparently didn't bother to tell the last person who locked this piece of property in, by the way, let's reserve an easement for the person who buys this piece of property down the road. Apparently the guy didn't do that. But the funny thing is that the way the properties were disposed of, my client's property, just being in front, was the obvious one you'd like to have the easement over if you owned the landlocked piece. But it was not the last one to go. And so it was clearly the mistake made by the guy who was selling off the parcels. And my friend told me, he said, he goes, I can't imagine someone's going to build back there. It's just a piece of nondescript woodland with scrub on it. And he's like, you could go back there and I suppose, harvest the trees for a pulp or something. But he goes, it's not on a lake, it's not on a river, it's basically back out in the woods. It's the kind of thing that you'd, see on a bad FBI profile or documentary about some guy living in the woods skinning people or something. But anyways, didn't happen in this case. So there you have it. That's the story of the trees. I wrote a piece of hate mail. I don't like to do that, and I don't do it very often, but that was one example where it apparently worked. So that's the tree story. Questions or comments, put them below. Otherwise, talk to you later.